Welcome to Betrayal Recovery Radio, the official podcast of APSATS, the Association of Partners of Sex Addict Trauma Specialists, hosted by Dr. Jake Porter. APSATS is a nonprofit organization providing professional training and compassionate support to partners affected by problematic sexual behavior and betrayal trauma. In each episode, Dr. Jake guides a conversation of enlightening insights and practical tools to empower those affected by sex addiction and betrayal trauma to use their voices and live their values. The mission of Betrayal Recovery Radio is to offer hope to those in need of healing and growth to those moving through grief. And now, here's your host, Dr. Jake Porter.
Welcome back to Betrayal Recovery Radio, where today I'm going to share with you the second part of my conversation with Matthew and Joanna Raabsmith and Dan Drake, who are all the authors of Building True Intimacy, a really powerful book that lays out the roadmap for restoring relationships after betrayal. And we do a deep dive into their tool, the Intimacy Pyramid, which I have found to be so insightful and so helpful in thinking through what it takes to get to real intimacy. And their full bios I share in the first episode that has the first part of this conversation. So you can tune back there if you've not heard part one. I'd encourage you just hit pause right now, go back, find part one of my conversation with them and jump back in there. I do want to mention, I think it's about 1 week out now from the APSATS annual conference, Healing Together, Empowering Partners and the Professionals Who Guide Them. You can learn more about that conference, which will be held February 5th, 6th, and 7th via Zoom at apsats.org. That's apsats.org/podcast. If you've not yet claimed your free gift from APSATS, you can do so at apsats.org/podcast and get that free download from Dr. Crystal Hollenbeck, Expectations, What Should the Betrayed Expect from the Betrayer in the Therapeutic Process. Okay, I don't want to wait any further to let you listen in now on part two of my conversation with the Raabsmiths and Dan Drake. Y'all tell me if this isn't where it fits in the pyramid. But so I'm speaking the truth. I'm doing it, taking responsibility for the truth. You know, I'm doing it from a regulated place. I'm being reliable. I'm owning it when I'm not. Is this also where empathy comes in, right? Where we can both speak truth, we can both be honest, and now the betrayed partner, if the betrayed partner has something painful, potentially shaming, whatever to share, rather than being met with resistance, defensiveness, minimizing, darvoing, all of that, they can be met with validation, attunement, and empathy.
Yeah. Because that really fits into that sense of responsibility for the actions, right? And so, one of the two ways that I see this play out really well is around validation, right? Being, like you said, instead of invalidating and trying to flip it, I'm able to say, no, that actually does make sense that you feel that way. It makes sense that you don't trust me. It makes sense that you're questioning me, even as I'm trying to be transparent. And that validation is so big, that empathy kind of through validation. We also see something that with empathy, we talk about advocacy. We think empathy drives advocacy. It doesn't set me against the other person. It really sets me with them and says, hey, because you are going through this, that doesn't make you my enemy. And I think that's sometimes because of all the emotions and the hurt, so many couples feel adversarial, right? It's you versus me. And I think you can build so much safety in the relationship by having empathy that allows you to be that advocate, right? So if you've got a partner who's hurt, right, and from their betrayal and from being betrayed, you can stand next to them. I want to be a part of the journey you're on to heal from the things that I did. And that advocacy really changes the game, right? It goes from adversaries, right? And kind of, because I do think sometimes it's like, well, I guess I better understand you even though you're my enemy, rather than empathy is that you're not my enemy, right? You are my partner. I am your advocate. right? I am here for that process. And you're absolutely right. Like that's where so much safety gets reestablished.
And we talked about, right, when I've been withholding from the relationship, a way I rebuild safety is by now pouring into the relationship those things I withheld. And so you'll see empathy showing up under vulnerability because we feel like it's a vulnerable action. I'm allowing myself, my emotions to be open to the influence of this person's story and experience. That's a vulnerable step, right? And so that's why you need a high level of self-regulation to be able to do that really well and not drop into shame or drop into those places, right? And we would typically say that betrayed spouse is kind of leading the way in the pyramid. So we expect them to pour vulnerability into the relationship before we ask that betrayed spouse to reciprocate that, right? And so a way that they rebuild that trust and that safety is by demonstrating I am now willing to show up vulnerable in this relationship when I wasn't before.
Yeah.
You can't emphasize enough what you just said, Joanna, the regulation piece, because if I'm not regulated, I'm not going to be able to show empathy. Like if I'm seeing you as an adversary and you're attacking me and I'm in self-preservation mode, I'm not going to be able to have that empathy. So that's so critical for this.
Yeah. Or sometimes we'll see on the other side, I'm in performance mode and I try to put on empathy and I've learned the right words, but man, partners see through that so fast. And that will actually erode safety so much more quickly because then it doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't feel honest.
Yeah. And I think telling on some of us in the field, I know most of us have created some type of acronym for empathy or there's all these things and they're really good. I think they're really helpful. We did, and I like ours, right? But I also recognize that it's so easy to just be like, oh, I'm going to say this script and I'm going to say this word, right? And I look at you and I nod my head and I tell you what you want to, and like I said, but when I'm regulated, that's what allows me to actually feel it with you, right? That's that empathy. Like I'm feeling it with you. I'm there with you and I'm willing to be in that space. And it's totally different.
Yes. Very good. Okay. All right. Let's talk about trust.
Why don't we?
Okay, let's talk about trust. And here's what I was thinking. So because we're talking about being reliable, having the truth. I made a note about this somewhere. Where did I put it? Oh yeah. So being reliable, I'm telling the truth. I'm taking responsibility. So for the times I'm not reliable, and so the idea is that's creating safety, which then would lead to trust. And this is very counterintuitive for a lot of the people I work with. What that means is in the moments when I haven't been trustworthy, admitting my lack of trustworthiness will in fact make me more trustworthy.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. And I mean, it's like, I've had guys like, I ought to be like, am I speaking, Swahili or, Hebrew or something to them? But no, listen, and why? It goes back to the foundation of honesty, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk about trust.
Yeah, well, it is.
I mean, essentially, like the starting point of trust is words and actions lining up. And this is a step. So the prior components before this, what are we calling levels, not components? We keep levels. The levels below, we'll get it. The levels below this, there's a lot of individual work for both. So, I can work on both partners but the betraying and the betrayed can do work on regulation, self-regulation, building internal safety. There's work to be done. Trust is now, it's a very relational step because now it's the proving grounds. This is where we're now putting it all into place. And it's like, sometimes we use a building metaphor, if we've got a new foundation started, it's set. Now it's actually the step of actually stepping onto that foundation. Does it hold my body? Can I the weight of my body? So there's a step, there's an action step that's really relational in this place. But again, words and actions lining up is going to start to rebuild trust, that reliability. So these build on each other. But that's the starting place.
Yeah.
And I think, as you're saying, I'll sometimes use phrase like, for a spouse who's committed betrayal, your focus is on being trustworthy, not on being trusted. If your goal is to be trusted, you will never get there. You will be putting the demand on the partner and the relationship to give you what you could give yourself, which is to be a person who's trustworthy. When you are willing to be trustworthy, including naming when you're not, that is what will establish that true trust, right? It will establish that relational trust for you. I do think, though, what's so tricky for couples who've been through betrayal is, how do we go back to that? I was, having a conversation with someone yesterday, and the question, I can't imagine a relationship with this person where I trust them again. And I think that is such a real experience. And so I get it that this is such a huge shift for the couple when they're there going, okay, we're going to kind of do this again, right? We have a lot of couples who come to us early on. They're like, hey, we want to reestablish our marriage. We're in this for the long haul. I think then they get to that place where, we're going to be a couple again. And how scary that is, and how important that they have some kind of guidance on what that looks like, on what that kind of stepping into that space again together means, because I think they're so afraid that we're just going to go back to the way it was before, right? Now that all of this kind of stuff in our past is taken care of, we just go back to being a normal couple. And I think betrayal couples have that kind of guard, especially betrayed spouses are like, nah, not doing that, right?
And I found it can be really helpful to name along the way those evidences that weren't there before now of honesty and safety, right? That is so powerful when you have things you can actually point to, right? That means, my step of trust is grounded. It's now grounded in something. It's grounded in this evidence. When my partner showed up and I was in pain and I was dysregulated, and they stayed there with me, and I didn't feel alone anymore, right? Like, that was a big moment. That hadn't happened before, right? And so, like, naming those, tracking those along the way makes that step make sense, and makes it a little bit easier when you get to that place to push into that trust building, that I'm ready to pour back into the relationship mutually at that point, right? There's still a lot of pieces recovery-wise that come, but it's a lot more mutual cooperative building now of this new relationship.
Yeah. So, go ahead, Dan. You about to say
I was going to say, I mean, I hear this a lot from partners where, how do I even say it? That I don't trust. I don't trust. And it feels like trust it's a light switch. It's binary. Right. I trust or I don't trust. Yeah. I found it way more helpful to think of trust on a spectrum or a continuum. Right. What level of trust do I have? Because if our goal, the reality is, and I'm sure partners understand this, maybe betrayers don't, we're never getting back to 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we had, we just won't. It's not realistic to think we're going to get to 100% trust. Triggers will happen. Some, things, reminders are going to come up. There might be some things, if I've been so deeply betrayed by somebody, we can rebuild that. Of course we can rebuild trust, but will it ever be 100%? No. So if I'm waiting for 100% to take that step, that's not going to be realistic. So what level of trust do I have in the relationship right now? What step could I take commensurate with that level of trust? I think that's what I like to look at. We don't want to open someone up completely to, trying vulnerability, but, I think there's an action step that takes courage too, by the way. Courage is a critical part of this step too. I have to have some courage that, there's enough built and that there is authenticity. And it didn't just come from nowhere, because we've done some hard work before this, rebuilding honesty in the relationship, rebuilding safety. Okay, I can see those things like Joanna talked about. And by the way, our brains are wired towards, especially after betrayal, our brains are wired towards threat cues. I'm going to look for danger. We're going to be more attuned to those things. And I'm sure most addicts will recognize this. Partners are going to be way more attuned to what they're not doing well than what they are doing well. So I think that's also the reminder as professionals to say, you know what, he's not perfect. He's got a lot of work to do. Yeah. And what I do see him doing is this, and this, and this. And those things, I do see some of those changes. So I think if we can, I do start seeing those changes, maybe there's some trust I can start to rebuild. Maybe not perfect, maybe not 100%, but we have more I have more courage now to take more steps forward.
And
in the relationship.
re-understanding what trust looks like in a relationship. I think for some partners or for both people, maybe they assume, oh, once we've rebuilt trust, you don't ask me questions anymore, right? Or if something feels off for whatever reason, right? Oh, I give you the benefit of the doubt and I don't ask and we move on, right? But going, no, rebuilding trust actually means building trust in yourself and what your gut's saying or maybe what you're seeing, and coming from a place of goodwill when you engage with your partner around that, right? And going like, hey, this thing happened. I don't fully understand it. Can we talk about that, right? It didn't feel totally safe. Help me understand what was going on, right? We can come in together now and maintain trust in the way we handle those places that feel unsafe or feel like we don't have full trust yet. And so I think kind of, sometimes I think our version or our view of what, a trusting relationship will look a certain way and won't have these things or will have these things needs to be reimagined.
Yeah. And I love the reminder that trust, it's not the off on switch. It's not the all or nothing. It's not I trust you or I don't. Yeah. I can both trust you and not trust you at the same time.
Yeah.
And I can slide up and down this spectrum. And just this morning, I had a group coaching session with my online couples program, and a betrayed partner reported something so cool. And I think it's a good illustration. It came to me as I was listening to y'all of how that trust can slide up the scale. Mm-hmm. And it's not always necessarily about these big, huge things like, okay, now I'm good with you traveling again, or okay, now I'll have sex with you again, or okay, now what these big things. So what she reported was that she's got a doctor's appointment coming up, and her husband said, hey, do you want me to go with you to the doctor's appointment? She's like, no, you never go with me. No, it's fine. You don't need to go. And he said, okay, I just wanted to offer. And then, a couple of days later, he said, I was thinking about it. I really don't mind going. I'd love to go if you want me to go. And she's like, no. And she was kind of annoyed about it. But then as she sat on it and listened to some things in a coaching session that we had, what she realized was for a long time, that's what she wanted. And he was never there. Right. He was never there. So now it's showing up. You're right. These people, they've been doing the work. This guy's been doing the work. They've done the disclosure. This guy's been honest. He's gotten great relationally, with reliability and empathy and all of these things. And she was like, you know what? I'm telling myself it doesn't matter to me, but I feel tears coming up as I'm thinking about how angry I am that he keeps asking me, right? And she goes, okay, I'm going to let him come with me. That's an act of trust, right? That's an act of trust that
that's amazing.
He's going to show up. He's going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then this won't get taken away from me again. This thing that I wanted and longed for and I didn't get, I'm going to let myself take that in.
Yeah.
Meaning that I'm going to trust that I won't lose it again. So
absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
When I think you're pointing to something we will often do with couples at this phase is really start to get them imagining what kind of relationship do we want going forward. I think this trust phase is where the kind of couple does reset and they do start talking about what are our values? How do we want to honor those? Are we going to honor those by going to appointments together, right? Supporting each other in our journeys, because that didn't, like you said, like that wasn't a part of who we were before, but I wanted that. Right. And now I believe we have the kind of connection because we've built with honesty and safety. Then we can start asking for those things, right? There's that kind of heart opening that says, no, I want to ask for that again, or I want to see that again. And this is where the work I think gets really fun. And for those of us who get to work with couples, right, we get to see these shifts. And one of the things that we see is this does usually happen. There is kind of a naturalness to it, right? It's the accumulation of the work that really opens that heart to say, okay, I'm ready for that. I'm ready for that risk. And I'm ready to decide who we're going to be going forward. To start making those commitments. We talk about commitment, right? And it's really about like, what are our commitments? We know I know as a betraying spouse, right? I didn't honor those vows and commitments before necessarily the way I wanted to. What does that commitment look like now?
And it's a vulnerable step for that partner too, right? Like you said, like, how do I know I'm not going to lose this again? It's vulnerable to name those wants, those desires. It's vulnerable to allow that person to step in, right? It's really this place of now interdependence and going, I'm going to lean on you again, but I'm really hoping you don't let me down this time, right? Because it hurt the last time I fell. It really, right? And so it takes a lot of trust to start to lean in that vulnerable way back into a relationship.
Yeah. I was just going to like that. I think that's so important too, because I think, and this is probably for the betrayer to understand, it's really delicate at this point. We're rebuilding something. You said, Matthew, it's true. This is fun. We're seeing couples start to shift. Man, if we're thinking of like a shoot, it's like a shoot growing of a tree. The tree is not strong yet. It's very delicate, and we have to really be cautious here, and protective of this thing, because like to your point, Joanna, I'm opening, partners opening up more, and they're potentially taking those steps, the courageous steps forward. But that's really triggering. That could feel, and so there might be 2 steps forward, and then there may be some pushback, so just know, for the betrayers, this is a time where you can really, really double down with all those other things you've already been working on and continuing to do, because, your partner may open up to you one moment, and then the next moment be so activated by opening up. So they may push you away or get angry or triggered and bring up some questions about the past. And that might be really confusing, where you're thinking, oh, I thought we were taking these steps forward. To me, that is the step forward. That's normal. We need to expect that. And so don't think you're on the wrong track. That just says, okay, this is just a really delicate rebuilding, that, you were the source of comfort, and now you're the source of comfort and danger. And now we're hopefully building back more comfort. And that's really fragile and delicate. So I don't want to gloss over that there's a lot of gracing involved in this step, and a lot of, continuing to do that regulation work and all the other stuff that kind of undergirds all this.
Hey there, I wanted to pause for just a moment in our conversation here to make sure that you've claimed your free copy of my book. If you didn't know, this past season, I released my first book, Breaking Barriers, Building Bridges. It is right here. It's the couple-centered recovery model for lasting connection after betrayal. And I am giving this away for free at my website. If you are interested in learning what it means to actually heal together as a couple, to put the relationship at the center of your healing process, this is a great, simple, short. It is a short and accessible book to talk about what that means and how that happens. You can go to my website, drjakeporter.com/breakingbarriers, to claim your free copy today. Yeah, so good. So, I mean, it sounds like vulnerability, which is the next level, right? I mean,
imagine that.
This is so well thought out. So, yeah. So let's talk about vulnerability. You start. I think, Dan, you said, the military definitions of what we get if we look it up. What are we really talking about here in a relationship? What do you have in mind when you say we're going to be vulnerable?
We often joke when we talk about this and say Brene Brown, and then we move on. This is not a novel concept. There's a lot written about it. Brene Brown's done a ton of work on this. So, and I think we incorporate a lot of that. To us, it's vulnerability is I'm giving of myself to, I'm opening up myself to my partner, to the other, and that allows them the opportunity to open back up to me. So it's this deep opening of self in new ways to hopefully get to new places in the relationship. And again, I don't know about everyone, you guys and anyone listening. I took a lot of the stuff underneath vulnerability for granted early on. Like, okay, I didn't think about, when I'm getting into a relationship, how do we build honesty in a relationship and safety and trust? I kind of understood the idea of vulnerability and intimacy, sort of, to whatever limited degree I could. But I think there was this, I didn't know, this is not just starting up with I'm just going to expose myself to my partner or to the partner to the betrayer. There's a lot that's built up underneath this that allows me this opportunity to share more fully of myself in a safe way.
Yeah, exactly. and in a safe way for me and for the other person, right? If I'm not self-aware, if I don't know myself well, if I try to step into that place of vulnerability, it could be an unsafe sharing. And we actually see this in couples sometimes, someone trying to be honest or trying to be vulnerable and really ends up dumping all of their pain on their partner and making it their responsibility, and does more damage. And so,
especially if they say I'm, they'll use therapy lingo or I'm sharing my truth or something, but it's really,
totally. Yeah, exactly.
But it's really harmful.
Yeah. And so that's again why that honesty, safety is so important before you step into that. And so going, wait, I have to know myself if I'm going to let down the defenses and be vulnerable and let my partner now know me in that way. And so kind of that self-knowing, letting down that guard and being able to share myself in that way. And then reciprocate, right? That space of vulnerability that's going to lead to intimacy is really a reciprocation of those things. And so the kind of some of the places we focused on were these kind of when I let my guard down and I am more influenced by my partner. There is more interdependence here in this stage. I am vulnerable, and we get to do that together to move towards that intimacy.
And I find what's interesting is couples who've done really good work, who get to this level, they start sharing things with each other that they would maybe be sharing with their therapist or with their recovery group. And not in a kind of like, I'm taking this because but it's that I know that who we are as a couple and who I am as a person, I can take this hard thing and I can share it with you as a part of that scaffolding structure that I have built for myself. And now we get to share that together because of what we've done to kind of build trust. And I think some things that we often see in these phases is there's typically a grieving and a kind of forgiveness ritualization a lot of times in vulnerability. There's usually been forgiveness that's been taking place, right? We've been talking about kind of rebalancing and repairing and amends. We often see that vulnerability is the place where we will have rituals where couples will kind of let go or say, hey, we recognize that we are in a completely different place. We want to name that ritualistically. And at the same time, we'll see couples that are willing to grieve and really grieve for each other. One of the most powerful things I've seen, and I don't think this is a requirement, I've just seen it offered so generously from partners, is they will begin to grieve for their spouse who is a sex addict, for what they lost in their addiction, right? For the way that their childhood trauma often impacted them, right? Because so much trust has been built in the relationship, the partner then feels free to go, okay, I can actually have that level of empathy for you, right? That level of grief for what you went through, rather than kind of these separate worlds, these worlds kind of come together. And that's what's so powerful when you've built that foundation.
Yeah. Here's a quote from the book. Vulnerability feels risky, but it's the only way to find true safety in a relationship. There's the idea of these levels reinforcing each other, right? Opening up opportunity for more honesty, more safety, more trust. But I love this quote because it's something I communicate to betraying partners or to recovering addicts often is, guess what? Hey, you deserve to have the experience of being fully known and fully loved.
Yes.
Right? Like, and you have no idea until you really put yourself out there and you truly vulnerably allow yourself to be seen and known. You can't understand what it's like to feel safe, accepted, loved, at home. You deserve that. Every human does.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. Beautiful.
Yeah. Okay. So intimacy. So we're at the top of the pyramid. Now by intimacy, y'all mean sex, right?
Yeah, definitely.
That's all intimacy is, right, Jake? That's
what one guy told me y'all meant by it. I don't know that he actually read the book, but he bought it because he thought this is a true story. This is a true story. He bought the book because he thought it was going to explain how to get back to having sex with his wife.
Oh man, I appreciate that.
Did he get his answer?
Thank you for your support.
I think we pretty quickly realized that wasn't the main thrust of the book. And I don't know that I encouraged him to go ahead and read it, but I don't know that he did. Okay. So if we're not talking about sex, what are we talking about here? And actually we've talked about what intimacy is. Actually, where I want to go here is how, like almost sort of the phenomenological aspect of this, or the experiential, like what would be signs that people might begin to notice, like, hey, I think we might be getting there. I think we might be, at the peak, or something like that. What would it feel like? Yeah.
I think one of those things we have in this level, one of the things that we have is play. And I think that's something that we start to see, and that obviously intimacy is more than this. I'm just saying that may be one of the signs that you're starting to see when couples start to play a bit more, when it's not always so heavy and so fraught with, we're moving from adversaries to now, we're actually a team, and we're starting to let down our guards so much that we can be silly, or we can do, we can have our own, inner things that are going like these. We just start to be a bit more free to be our full selves. And I just start to see some of those things, which may have happened early in a relationship before the rupture, and gets lost and gets, so guarded that people can't just be, their kind of full free selves. So that might be one of the components that you start to see. And I think it's really beautiful when you can start to see couples have that lightness, a bit more of a lightness to them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love it.
I think we also, it's interesting because we talk about the work that you do in intimacy, but it is also the signs in some ways, right? They're playful, intimate couples also have a sense of purpose to them. They understand there's a reason they exist as a couple, that there is this kind of third thing between them that matters just as much as who they are individually. And and there is a purpose to the actual marriage. And that sometimes gets played out in like lives like ours, where we've kind of gone back and said, hey, we want to do this work. We want to help other people. But sometimes it's just that they have a sense of our relationship impacts people, right? The way people see us together impacts who kind of what they imagine, what they dream. I've seen some really powerful stories where couples who've come so far in the pyramid have now gone back and really dedicated their work to the healing of their children, to their kind of processes, right? To saying, we want to be a safe space for our children to kind of go through a healing process, because we know that what kind of happened between us has impacted them. Right. And now we're ready to kind of create those spaces for them. So I think that sense of purpose is usually really evident.
Yeah. I think the last thing we talk about in the book is passion. And I think that is both. It can be that experience of like emotional desire and passion. And like, it is something that is drawing us together, right? A lot of times we will talk about, we call it our usness. When two individuals come together, they create a third thing, the relationship. That's the thing we're pouring into. That's the thing we're nurturing. And as that relationship gets stronger and more secure, it creates this mutual flourishing, this life-giving experience individually and together, right? And so I think oftentimes there will also just be a passion for caring for the relationship. We see those couples excited to be together, excited to do things that are going to strengthen their marriage and strengthen their relationship. And you can just like, it is so tangible, honestly. Like when I had a couple that I've been working with for a while, and just over the last few months, every week they show up on the screen, right? And I'm like, this is different. This is changing. Their facial expression, their body posture towards each other, the back and forth, the tone of voice, like all of it. And so it's so much fun to see a couple, like usually it is kind of that looking back and like, hey, I think we did it, right? Because it's so subtle, it's so slow, even as it's like very tangible, especially for people, I think, on the outside. So it's always fun to then be the one to hold up the mirror and just kind of like reflect back, point back, like, hey, do you guys notice this change? And they're like, oh my gosh, we do.
We did it.
We did it. Yeah.
Yeah. So good. So good. So, I saved this quote for sort of for the end here, because this really is my favorite line, I think, from the book. So I'm curious to know which one of you actually.
Yeah, I
wrote
know, no pressure.
I'm sure this is
AI
the
wrote
one
it.
paragraph. This probably comes from the one paragraph where you all sat down together.
Of course.
And
We wrote every word together.
yes, right. So I love this. I love this though. And okay, resilience is built in the little moments of choosing connection over avoidance.
Are you asking who's going to take credit?
Name that quote.
It's
Probably
okay.
the editor.
At least I think that's a direct quote from the book. I wrote it in the cover, and I have attributed it to you many times. So, but I love that. So resilience is built in the little moments of choosing connection over avoidance.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of, as we bring this conversation to a close, I thought I want to go there because it's incredibly practical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I make up that building this pyramid, making your way up these levels. I mean, this is work. Let's just be real. This is labor. This is work. There is hardship and challenge along the way. It is not going to be a perfectly linear, work of progress. And in these hard moments, it would be easy to think, oh no, here's an obstacle. Oh no, we're off track. Right? No, that is the moment. That is the opportunity in this moment to lean in and choose connection, whatever that looks like, wherever you are in the pyramid.
Yeah.
And as you do that, you are building resilience, building character, living that integrity, demonstrating that alignment for your partner, but for yourself as well.
Yeah.
So I love that. And I want to also give you all an opportunity, like folks who are listening, what would you say to them wherever they are in this process? Something practical, something to take away, something encouraging, other than buy the book, which I'll say that,
Yeah. I mean, I think a practical advice is to not forget to look back down the mountain. I think we are so often focused on the peak that we just forget how far we've come. And not this, I don't want this to sound like bad news, but when you do get to those intimacy period, you get to the top, you're going to realize there's more work to do, right? There's more mountain to climb. And so if you forget to turn around and look back, and I think it is the couples that we see in this process, and Jake, I know, and Dan, we've all had this opportunity to work with couples, and it is a miracle that they have the kind of relationships that they have the kind of connections. And I'm always encouraging couples to look back, even if maybe you're just getting into the safety level and you're acknowledging, maybe as a betraying spouse, for the first time in my life, I've chosen just to put all the cards on the table. And that's a huge gain, right? For the first time in our life, we're talking about what happened between us, right? And I think having that ability to look back, to reflect on where you've come, it gives you that energy for that next step, right? That because it is going to be more work, right? Okay, what's next? So that's what I always love to remind my couples.
Yeah, kind of similar, but a little different is, I don't know, when you hear all of it or you read the whole book, it can be really overwhelming. It's a lot. There's a lot that goes into building intimacy, building a secure attachment. And so I think it can be really exciting and encouraging to kind of have a vision and a roadmap. It can also be really daunting, especially if you feel like, ooh, we're down here. We're starting from square one. And so being able to look at what's our next step and just focus there. All right. Kind of really understand the reality of where you're at in relationship and what is it that we need, what resources, what support. There's some fantastic ones out there. What do we need to just get to that one step ahead? And once we're there, then we'll think about that next step. And so take it slow. This is not a sprint, guys. This is a marathon. Like Matthew said, the work never ends. This will be the rest of your life. And so really kind of aligning with your values in that work so you don't get burned out is important, but not feeling like you have to take it all on at once.
Thank you. It's good.
You said some great stuff, and I was thinking of what do I add to that? I think, sometimes it feels like you're in a dark tunnel. These might be words. You can hear the inspiration of someone who's made it, and you may not be able to see it or feel it right now at all. You may be, stuck in a real difficult trauma loop. And I completely get that. And I think that's the grace for yourself, especially for the betrayed partner, that, give yourself, really give yourself that freedom to care for yourself. I think that's so important for this. We do see, even with steps forward, just don't be too discouraged if, again, for a step or two forward, that it feels like we took a big step lateral or back. Like this is all part of it, which is really frustrating. I know. I mean, I wish it worked where we just it was a straight line up, and it just doesn't work that way. So if you can be, I think to Joanna's point, like if you can take one step and we're moving in the right direction, we'll work on the next step after that. I think that's so, just give yourself that, grace and space to do the healing that you need. And then you're worth it. This is something, we see couples. I know for me, I don't know about you guys, I couldn't do this work if couples didn't actually start to heal and become, new and better than they were before. This would be so disheartening. And you may feel like that there isn't hope right now. So I just want you to know, like, I couldn't do this work if we didn't see it, because it would be really depressing. Like it would be discouraging. So we see it and know that it's possible for you if you put in the work. And that's especially for the betraying person, that this is going to be a lot of onus on you to initiate this healing after the rupture.
Yes. Awesome. Well, thank y'all so much. Thank you for your time. I really respect each of you. I'm so grateful for the work that you do, and I appreciate you coming on Betrayal Recovery Radio.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate you.
I'm sure we'll see you again
Sometime.
All right. Y'all take care.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Betrayal Recovery Radio, hosted by Dr. Jake Porter. If you value the content we've shared today, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review. This helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. For more resources, visit apsats.org. That's APSATS.org.